I've given you the allow record.
And it's recording. Fantastic.
Oh,
okay.
there it is.
Something
Okay.
new. So,
Okay. So that was easy. That was
yeah,
real
that was
easy.
really,
Just manage participants and allow record. Good. So we're recording. You got it on your end. That way
Yep.
you don't have to download it.
Yep. I'm hoping that it should be good from here. So welcome to today's podcast. I'm here with my very good friend and mentor, Tom Campbell. Hello, Tom.
Hello, Donna.
Thank you for participating in the podcast today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to participate in the podcast today.
So the podcast, Exploring Consciousness, is for beginners. So a lot of what I'm going to say and would like you to direct is for people that just are realizing they're becoming aware and that we're more than something physical. So my first question, I'm going to do a little intro. There's a wonderful YouTube video I've directed my listeners to watch before listening to this podcast, my Big T.O.E's most controversial questions, so that they're familiar with what we're about to talk about. In that YouTube, you were asked, who are we really? And described 4 levels or dimensions that we exist in. 1, we as an avatar. 2, we as a free will awareness unit. 3, we as an IUOC, an individuated unit of consciousness. And we as part of the all. So my first question for the beginner. A lot of times they're not familiar with computer games or simulations, but they might have watched the movie Avatar. So can you summarize or give a brief description of those 4 dimensions and what happens in each one?
Well, sure. We'll start pretty much in the same order that,
okay.
That's sort of the bottom up order rather than
Bottom
the top
up.
down. Yeah, so we'll do the bottom up. And we'll start with the avatar, okay? An avatar is a rendered visual character that a player plays. Okay, now if you saw the movie Avatar, then you notice that the big blue guy was the avatar, and his player, the person that was playing him, was the guy with the bad legs who the
Marine Corps guy.
Yeah, the Marine Corps guy that had problems walking after an accident of some sort, I believe.
Yeah.
So he was the player. So when you have an avatar, you also have a player. And the avatar is something that is rendered within a reality. Okay, now in that case, they had a body, if you would, an avatar body, and that body could run around in that particular world with big blue people in it and do the things that big blue people did and interact with the big blue people. But it really wasn't a big blue person. It was, it was the Marine guy with the bad legs.
Yeah.
He was the one making all the choices for the avatar. So that's kind of the definition of an avatar. Now, if you play video games, say The Sims, then you have a Sims character, and that Sims character is drawn on the computer screen for you to look at, and you make all that Sims character's choices. So if you want the character to go to the refrigerator and get something to drink, then you can do that, and he'll get up out of his chair and walk over to the refrigerator and open the door and whatever, and you can manipulate what he does by making the choices and pushing the right buttons that then have those choices play out. And World of Warcraft, now that's one of things like magic workers and monsters and that sort of thing, wizards, magic users, elves, that kind of of characters. And all of the characters there are played, all the avatars are played by various players. So at any one time there may be 1 million players playing World of Warcraft, and they may be all over the planet. They could come from all over the planet, and they're all playing at this game, and they're interacting with each other. Now, besides that, there are things called non-player characters, which are the characters that the computer is playing. which in World of Warcraft is usually the monsters, because one of the goals of the game is for the players to beat the monsters. So the monsters are often played by the computer. That's not played by another, player. So that's kind of the parlance of what we mean when we use the word avatar. It's a body that has a player, but that body is in a virtual reality. Avatar goes along with virtual reality, and that avatar is in a virtual reality wherein, from that avatar's viewpoint, it's in a physical reality. So if you're an elf or a barbarian wandering around in World of Warcraft, that World of Warcraft map looks like a physical reality. It has trees and rocks and skies, and sometimes the sun's out, sometimes it's day, sometimes it's night, sometimes it rains. To get to one place to the other, you have to walk or run or fly on a flying lion, or you have various choices of things you can do. But it's, if you trip, you fall down. If you stay underwater too long, you drown. It has all the characteristics of a physical reality, much like ours. Obviously, it's patterned after ours, so the players are familiar with the way it works. There's gravity and other such things. If you throw a rock, then it travels on a parabolic trajectory, and because of the gravitational field. So it's all generated mathematically by a computer. So the computer generates all the scenes, the rivers, the rocks, the players' bodies, the avatars. It generates all that. And when a player makes a choice, then that choice goes up to the computer, and the computer then draws the avatar following that choice, executing that choice. And then there may be consequences in executing that choice. You may run into another player, or you may run into a monster or something. So there's consequences. Then the computer computes the consequences of making that choice and sends it back to the player in terms of a visual of the character, turning around, doing something, and having consequences. So that's the way virtual reality works. It has a player, it has avatars. The players make the choices. Now, some interesting things about that, as long as we're trying to develop the basics so that people can follow the conversation, is that from the avatar's viewpoint, the virtual reality is like a physical reality from that viewpoint. But the computer that's computing the reality can't be inside the virtual reality. The computer computing the reality has to be outside that reality. In other words, it has to be non-physical from the viewpoint of inside that virtual reality. And the player, likewise, has to be non-physical to that virtual reality. So you couldn't have the player also being a virtual, character in the virtual reality. The player has to be outside that virtual reality. So the player has to be also non-physical from the viewpoint of inside the virtual reality. So if you're an elf and you're in the World of Warcraft, then your player is elsewhere, making all your choices, and the computer computing your reality is elsewhere.
Just like the marine guy in Avatar wasn't in the environment; he was back at the ship.
He was back at the ship. That was his reality.
That was his reality.
Yeah, he was back at the ship. That was his reality. Exactly. Although in the movie Avatar, it doesn't exactly follow this gaming mode, because the other blue people that were back there were in their own physical reality that existed,
Yeah, that was different. Yeah.
Anyway, so that was a little different, but more like the Matrix, where you had this world where you could walk down the street and interact, but it was all inside the computer.
Got it.
You actually were just a body with a plug plugged into the back of your neck, and you were getting the signals, and that's the virtual reality kind of definition, is that you're the player and you're not in that same reality frame. So in the movie called Avatar, you actually were.
Okay.
Because that guy's body was in the same reality frame as the blue people. He was just back at the at the headquarters where the military group was, and the blue people lived out in the jungle.
Right.
But it was all part of the same reality. So it's not quite the same. But anyway, that's kind of the idea. So if we have avatars and we have players, and from the avatar's viewpoint, the players in the computer are non-physical, right? That kind of sets it up. So now we move up from the bottoms up. The next step up is this free will awareness unit. And that is what I'm describing as the player. Okay, that's a chunk of consciousness, because after all, what the player does is make choices. That's all it does. It looks, sees what's going on, see what the issues are. It has goals and things it's trying to do. You know, maybe it's beat the monster, or maybe it's, you know, find money or something. And it takes chances. It makes choices to try to meet its goals. And that is the free will awareness unit. It's just a chunk of consciousness that makes free will choices. So it can choose what its avatar does within the constraints of the virtual reality. It can't make its avatar do anything. You know, if you're a wizard in World of Warcraft, you can flap your arms, but you won't fly, you know, because that's not part of the rule set. Wizards don't fly, you know. Now, if you're a free will awareness unit, you may tell your avatar to flap its arms, but it won't fly unless the rule set of that virtual reality allows that to happen. So a virtual reality is defined by a rule set, and it's that rule set that the computer uses in order to compute that reality. Okay, so now the next step up was an individuated unit of consciousness. Okay, this individuated unit of consciousness is a little bigger chunk of consciousness than the free will awareness unit. Matter of fact, it's kind of the parent consciousness of the free will awareness unit.
Yeah.
That free will awareness unit is just a piece, a subset of this individuated unit of consciousness. And that's because the game we're playing here in this virtual reality is a game of growing up, you know, becoming love, getting rid of your fear. And that's not an easy game to win. That's not an easy game to level up in. It's a tough game, because the only way you can do it is by changing who you are, changing your viewpoint, changing your attitudes, changing you. And somebody changing themselves fundamentally is a lot harder to do than it is for us to talk about. It's a very difficult thing that takes a lot of time and effort. So the whole point here is that over time, you make choices as a free will awareness unit. You're making choices that will help you grow up, help you make better choices, help you get rid of fear, help you grow up to become love. So it takes a lot of playing this game. Well, your character's going to die before you can win this game, because you know, the characters just don't last that long, and it's going to take you many, many, many game plays before you grow up. So you need another piece of consciousness that is the accumulator of all of these experiences. I call them experience packets.
Right.
So you have an experience packet, and you have another one, and you have another one. Well, the free will awareness unit is just the thing that has the experience. So now you need another thing that free will awareness unit is attached to, that accumulates all those experiences and looks at all those experiences and decides what it needs to do next. You know, where its problems are, what it has to learn, the kinds of things that needs to happen. So it's kind of the parent, if you will, the overview, the well, sometimes they call it the
the higher self.
yeah, sometimes it's called the something soul, the oversoul.
Oh, the
Sometimes
oversoul.
people call it the oversoul, you know, and then they call the free will awareness unit a soul, and then they call the individuated unit of consciousness the oversoul. There's all sorts of different terminology. I made up my own terminology because I didn't want people to come with a lot of emotional baggage based on names, because if you use the word soul, now that sounds religious, you know, and my Big Toe is not religious, although it does probably it's probably one of the bigger breakthroughs in theology, you know, but it's not religious. So in any case, so that's what this individuated unit of consciousness is. It's a chunk of consciousness that takes a piece of itself. That piece of itself makes choices for an avatar, and it collects all those pieces and sorts them and sifts them and does some statistical analysis on them and decides what's next. So it's kind of in charge of what do we do next. And once it figures that out, it just takes a little piece of itself, calls it a free will awareness unit, and logs it on to another avatar. So that's what it does. Now we'll take the last step up, which is the larger consciousness system itself. Well, this individuated unit of consciousness, and that's what you and I are, and all the other people out there listening to this. We're free will awareness units within an individuated unit of consciousness. And this individuated unit of consciousness didn't just pop up all by itself. Well, what do we have here? 7.5 billion of them. It didn't just all pop up like, mushrooms after the rain. And their source is the thing I call the larger consciousness system. And they are a part of this system. So there's this big consciousness system, and it broke off pieces of itself, which were individuated units of consciousness. Okay. And it did that because in its own evolution, it was kind of stuck because it was one big monolithic thing, and it was stuck with its own viewpoint, if you will. And there's fewer choices there. There's fewer possibilities of what you can grow into if you're just one thing. So it broke off pieces of itself, called them individuated unit of consciousness, gave them free will, and now they could interact with each other, such that the potential of that interaction now, because you have independent players, that potential interaction now grows hugely. Because what about all these independent players? Now what can you make out of that thing? So it did that, just like cells did the same thing. The cells divide, in order to make a multi-celled creature, because multi-celled creatures have more potential than single-celled creatures. That's just the way it works. So those are those four layers. So it starts with the larger consciousness system, of which all the rest of it are parts of it. So we're just kind of going down like in a Venn diagram of drawing circles inside of circles inside of circles. So you got the larger consciousness system. The individuated unit of consciousness is a subset of that, and it has all the properties and abilities, or I could say the potential, not abilities, but all the properties and the potential of the system itself. It can grow up just like the system's grown up. It's just a piece of the system. And then it has a subset of itself. That's the free will awareness unit, which is the thing that actually logs onto the avatar. Then you have the avatar, which is just something that's computed by a virtual reality rendering engine, if you will, in a game. And that's like the Sims character or the elf or that sort of thing. That's the thing that's actually interacting with other avatars in a virtual reality. And those interactions between those avatars creates choices, all sorts of choices, because now you have 7.5 billion avatars, all with free will, interacting with each other. And you can see that can produce a lot of mayhem and chaos, but also a lot of love and cooperation and creating some very, magnificent things together too. So it has all this potential, and that's the idea. So that's kind of the, those four things and where they fit in and how it all flows in a virtual reality.
Thank you, Tom. I have to tell my listeners how much you've affected me. I think one of the first things you did was you said, suspend your beliefs. And by doing that, I was able to get into these dimensions to say, I don't have to worry about my beliefs or my fears. I just need to know that I'm more than something that's physical. That was really number one for me, to suspend my beliefs. Number two, that's been hard for me, is that this seems so real, and you've talked about this being real, my avatar being so real. And I know for 1 year, I was like, then where am I? Where is my consciousness? And I know it appears real, and I can go into these 4 areas. I'm in an avatar now. I'm a free will awareness unit now. But kind of, is there a where? And my question is like, not how to get to each one, but where is it? Or it's really hard for me to know, then
Well,
where am I?
yeah, the reason it's hard to where am I guess is a secondary question to what am I? And we already just discussed the
Just,
what am I,
yes,
right? We
yes,
just did
yes.
that.
Yeah.
All right. The where am I?
Like
The
where?
problem with that question is that we as free will awareness units logged onto avatars,
Yes.
every piece of our experience, every piece of data we've gotten, everything we know of, we've gotten as data through an avatar. So
Yes.
our perspective is the perspective of the avatar, because it's not like we're at a computer playing this avatar and we can go take a break.
Right.
Yeah, go have a sandwich and then come back,
Exactly.
put the game on pause. We can't do that. This is a 100% involvement in this avatar. So we are that avatar 24/7, and we have been since before its birth. So that's the only thing we know. We didn't come in with any memory when we logged
Right.
on to be, to be the free will awareness unit of that avatar. We didn't bring any memory with us. So everything that we remember and know is what we learn through being that avatar, through making choices for that avatar. So we have the avatar's perspective.
Yes.
That's why we think that our physical body is the real thing. When this physical body is no avatar, it's the real me, because that's the perspective we have when you're completely um, embedded in the game, and that all your experience is the experience that your avatar has had. So when we're here in this virtual reality, it's a 3D virtual reality, up, up, down, and sideways, right?
Yep.
We have 3 dimensions here, and everything has a place. No
Yeah.
two
Yeah.
things shall occupy the same
Same
point of
place.
space, right? Newton's first law. So, we have, everything has space, has a place to be in, and has its own place to be in. No two things can be in the same place. So that's our viewpoint of reality, because that's always known since we've been, in this, connected, logged on to this avatar. So we think in terms of place. Where is it? Well, because in our virtual reality, that's a good question. Oh, you live in Chicago. Where's Chicago? Where is that on the globe? Well, you get out a globe and you can find it. And there's only one place called Chicago, and it's a certain place. And anybody who wants to go to Chicago, all can look at a map and find out how to get there, because it's a unique place. Well, consciousness is not like that. Consciousness is not a 3-dimensional reality. So that larger consciousness system isn't living in a 3D reality or a 4D reality or any kind of dimension. There is no place. There is no distance. It's just about information. That larger consciousness system is an information system. Okay, now, if we think about information, we still tend to say, well, the information must be in different places. My information's here and your information's there. Well, that's again us trying to make consciousness like our virtual reality here in 3 dimensions. If we think about information, how much space does information take up? Well, if you think of information as, let's say, little transistors on a chip, then it does take up space. But now that's a physical representation. That's a representation of information in the virtual reality. But what about the information itself? You see, information isn't transistor. That's just a
Ah,
medium in which we can put information. The transistor's not information.
it's not
The ink
information.
on the page is not information.
Information.
The pages in the book is not information. The information is the meaning, the content. That's the information. So if we look at a book and we can say, well, there's a physical book and it's got physical pages and it's got ink on paper and all those little ink smudges on the paper, that has to do with a language, and that language then has information. Well, the book, the ink, the paper, all of that is just a physical thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a thing that can carry data. Okay, it can carry data, and those ink squiggles represent data, but they're not information. It's the meaning of all those squiggles. What's the significance of all those squiggles the way they are? All that ink on the paper and the page after page. What's the significance, the meaning, the content? That's the information. And only a consciousness can take in information. A book can carry data. A consciousness can look at the data and turn that data into information by interpreting it. Okay, now that information as data can be interpreted many different ways. And you take different consciousnesses, and looking at that ink in that book, they'll all come to different conclusions about its significance, what it means, and so on. And each consciousness interprets it based on their own experience. You know, who they are, how much they know, their level of education, their experience, you know, how much they've read, how much they've done, how much they've seen. So they take what's in that book and they turn it into information interpreted in terms of their own experience base, their own knowledge, their own beliefs, their own misinformation, you know, their own errors, you know, they interpret into whatever it is they've got inside themselves. So the information isn't the ink, isn't the book, isn't the transistors. It's the meaning and significance of it. That's information. The rest of it just represents data. It's ways of storing data. So I can store data in transistors on a computer chip, where a transistor is either on or off, a 1 or a 0. So I'm actually storing data as binaries on this chip by millions and millions of transistors, that each transistor represents a 1 or a 0. So that's, you know, that's a digital way of storing information. I can write information down in a book. I take my pen and I can write it on a paper. Well, I'm storing data on that piece of paper. And I can take that piece of paper and put it in an envelope and put a stamp on it and mail it to you. And information now is traveling from me to you. And you get that letter and you open it up and you look at it. And you then translate that data that's on that paper into information, which is the meaning that it has for you. And whether the meaning that you translate it into is exactly the meaning that I meant when I sent it to you, well, you know, nobody knows that, you know, so that's what makes communication so hard, you know, is we're interpreted. So consciousness is just information. Information has no
reality.
size.
Yeah.
Information has no shape. Information doesn't weigh. Information is understanding, meaning, significance. You know, how much information can you put in a bottle? You know, well, you see, there's no, you know, how much does it weigh?
Yeah.
So it's not physical. Information is a non-physical thing. Data now can be physical. You know, you can store it as on transistors. You can store it as ink on paper. You can store it in all sorts of ways. That is, you know, that's data that you've stored in a medium. So the transistors are a medium, the paper and ink's a medium. You know, you could put little chips in rocks or whatever they did a long time ago, you know, pictograms, you know, and you could do that. And that's a medium then for storing the information. But that's data. I shouldn't say storing information, for storing the data.
Yeah,
So
storing data.
Yeah, that stores data.
Because information is non-physical.
Information takes a consciousness. There is no information there till a consciousness comes in and looks at the data and interprets it. You see, so data doesn't have a where. It doesn't have a place. It doesn't have an extent. It just has to be interpreted by a consciousness. So there is no physical aspect of information. It's non-physical. And when it's non-physical, it doesn't need a three-dimensional place to get around in. You see, it's not any distance at all from all other information. So it's hard for us to imagine, because our minds tend to want to put everything into a structure like the structure we're used to, a 3D structure. So we ask questions like, well, where is it? You know, because that's just our habit. That's the way we do things. Where's Chicago? You know, that's a good question if you want to go to Chicago. But to find information, it's nowhere and it's everywhere. You know, it's not in any particular place. Doesn't have distance. How far is it between chunks of information? Well, there is no distance. You know, how far is it between pieces of your understanding? You know, how far it is between various parts of your interpretation of something. There is no distance in mind. There is no distance in consciousness. So consciousness exists. That's this larger consciousness system. It's just this information system that exists and is evolving toward becoming love, because that lowers its entropy and makes it able to live longer and better. So that's, you know, so questions like that, where we want to take this consciousness, somehow stick it in a physical structure, and we just can't do it. That's why it's so hard. That's why it seems impossible to place where it is, because it is impossible.
You know, it's like it's going back and forth between philosophical questions and mechanical questions. You know, the philosophical questions about becoming love and evolving, and the mechanical questions about where is it, how do we get there? It seems to be, for me, you know, going back and forth. Okay, philosophically, we're non-physical. Philosophically, I just understood everything that you said. Makes a lot of sense. Now, mechanically, I want to say to get there, but I mean, and I know that's not
right.
it.
Where's
Right?
there?
Yeah,
right?
I'm not. Yeah. So it's, you know, you gave us the binaural beats. I know that we can get our intellect to stop processing this reality. Can you?
Well, okay.
Can you talk about that for the beginner?
Yeah. How
You
do
know,
you get there?
it's a mechanical thing that doesn't exist.
Well, the thing is that we have to stop thinking in terms of doing, because our doing is space related. Our doing is related to this virtual reality we're in. You know, it's got 3 dimensions, it's got a clock ticking, you know, time's going by, and we have this world that we live in, and we do things in this world. And what we do next is at a later time than what we did before that. You see, it's just, so it's ordered by space and by time. That's the doing world. But in the world of being, it's not like that. It's just what you are. And in that being world, there really is no space. It's not a thing that you do, it's a thing that you are. So in that world of being is just you being aware of the content of your consciousness. You know, all that stuff that you looked at and you interpreted and you tried to make sense out of it. And you are a consciousness. So the way we get to consciousness isn't by doing anything. Although we take, you know, we listen to binaural beats, that's something we do, but that doesn't really make it happen either. All that does is puts us in a state where it's easier for us to let go of processing physical data and doing, and get into a state where we just are, where we're just being. So that's the reason why when you talk about consciousness and you talk about other realities and so on, it's not a doing thing, it's a being thing. You get there because you are consciousness. That's how you can, you know, explore these realms, because you are consciousness. If you were just an avatar, well, you'd just be some calculations, you know, on a hard drive someplace. You see, that's not something that actually can be. That's just an image that we look at that keeps track of who's where and what are they doing and consequences. But the consciousness is really the being behind that all. So the consciousness just is. So the whole thing enables us to, you know, to do the paranormal things, the remote view, the healing, you know, the getting data out of the databases, seeing auras, you know, all these things that are generally, you know, lumped under paranormal.
Yeah.
They're just natural attributes of consciousness. And the way you access them is to not do, but be. There is no prescription. You see, first do this, then do that, you know, then, you know, look at the full moon, you know, then stand on one leg, then howl, you know, and then when you
I've
do
done
that,
all those things.
yeah, when you've done that, then you can remote view. Well, it's not like that. There is no prescription to do them, because they are basically part of the attributes of being. They're non-physical. They're attributes of consciousness. It's data that's available within this information system. And it doesn't reside anywhere in particular. It's just available, you see. So the first step is to let go of our sense of the physical and just be. And that's the point of meditation. In meditation, they tell you to sit down, get all the thoughts out of your mind. And if a thought comes in your mind, well, set it aside. Tell it to go away. You don't want any thoughts in your mind. You want to sit there and be empty. You want to sit there with a blank mind, but you're still aware. So what are you? You're just being. You see, when you're not processing physical data, when I'm not sitting in the chair because I feel the chair pushing against me, or because I'm uncomfortable, because my leg just fell asleep, or I hear traffic outside, horns blowing. You know, if you live in a city, there's always noise around you all the time. You know, if you process all that stuff out there, now you're processing in the physical. You're processing a virtual reality that appears to be physical from your viewpoint. Whereas when you meditate, you let all that go, and you let all your thoughts go, and you just be. So that's the whole key of meditation. It gets you out of the doing loop into the being loop where you are. And now once you get there, then you can just experience. Your intention will tend to take you places. Your intention will tend to attract information to you that is in answer to your intent, you know, your questions and so on. So that puts you in a totally different space. And once you get solid in that intuitive space, we'll call that an intuitive space versus an intellectual space. Once you get solid in that intuitive space to where you're not jumping in and out of it, and you're not trying to process it with your intellect, you're just there, then all the paranormal things just become pretty easy. It's a matter of focusing your intent to do various things, get data, you know, heal somebody, heal yourself, remote view, whatever. It's just a matter of focusing your intent, because all you're doing is picking up information from the information system called consciousness.
It's that being in the zone that the athletes talk about. When you're in the zone,
yeah.
when you're
in the
an
zone,
artist, when you're an athlete, when you stop thinking about it.
Yeah, being in the zone means you've told your intellect to sit down and be quiet.
Or you can duct tape it to your back. Just bring it along with you.
Yes. So that's the key. And to do anything really, really well, you need to get in the zone. Yeah. Anything. Whether it's running a race, you know, throwing a rock, you know, typing on a typewriter, anything that you need to do and do it really, really well, you can do it better from being in the zone, because you stop processing your intellect about how to do it and just do it. And with practice, that just doing it now is starting to work from the intuitive side. And that's so much more precise and so much quicker and so much more connected and coordinated and so on, that you can just do better. If you use your intellect, you're always stuck with this intellect trying to process, figure things out. Did I do that right? Okay, where's the T? Okay, it's this finger just up off the home key line, you know, up there, that's where it is, and then the E's next to it. And you know, if your intellect has to tell you where the keys are, you'll never type very fast. Maybe if you practice a whole lot, you might get up to 10 words a minute, maybe, but that's about the limit for processing it through your intellect. You have to get in the zone to where your fingers just do whatever they need to do. You see what you're typing, and your fingers just do it without you having to tell them what to do. That's being in the zone. And that's a much more powerful, a much more productive, a much more effective way of typing than using your intellect to solve the problem of where to put each finger. Well, it's true, you know, any athlete will tell you that the difference between the guys that win and the guys that almost win is mind. It's all mental. It's attitude. It's getting in that zone and staying in that zone, that's what makes the difference between the guy who comes in first and the guy who comes in, third or fourth.
And that's just really the key. If we remember that we're human beings, not human doings.
Yes,
If we
that's a good
remember,
way to put it. Never heard it put that way before. Yes.
that's really good. For the beginners, this is all really good information because you've given us a structure of 4 levels. You've given us an idea of what this is. So it helped us break open our brains to know that we're more than physical. You've given us vocabulary. You've given us ways to think about it, and then told us how to be and to practice the intuitive side. Is there anything else that you would tell a beginner that we haven't covered yet that might be how to start? Is there like specific YouTube or
yes.
your book or okay?
Well, there's a lot of resources out there. So if you're a
Yeah.
beginner and you need a little more information or a little more time
Yeah.
to find this out, to find this to be reasonable rather than crazy, then there's lots and lots of videos on YouTube, hundreds, probably thousands and thousands of hours out there. Every time I do a talk someplace, I try to copy it and, on tape. A lot of it's on video, some of it's just audio, but there's lots of it out there. And I get into more details. I talk about applications. How does it affect your life? How does it affect your relationships? How does it affect your world and your worldview? I talk about science. How does this this big toe of mine, derive science? And how does it derive quantum mechanics? How does it drive relativity? So I talk about science. I talk about how it affects your life. So all of the applications are out there on YouTube. And the book is free on Google Books. It's you have to read it on your computer screen, but it is free. But it doesn't cost that much either. You get 3 books for like $20-some, which is like $8 a book or something. Yeah,
Change your life.
They're really not all that expensive anyway, and you get them all the usual places: Amazon, bookstores, et cetera, et cetera. So those would be the 2 big resources. Would be videos on YouTube and the books. But you started the conversation saying that one of the things that helped you a lot was learning to suspend, your sense of reality, suspend your beliefs. Well, I generally tell people to suspend their beliefs because that helps them get into the state of just being. Because these beliefs are all tied up with doing and naming things, and it's all tied up with the intellect. So what I would prefer to have said, of course, was throw your beliefs away, not just suspend them. Take those beliefs and toss them out. Believe nothing. Stay skeptical of everything. Believe nothing at all. So belief is a problem. So you not only want to suspend them, you really want to rip them out by the roots and throw them in the trash. That's what you want to do with your beliefs. So you have no beliefs. You only have your own experience, and your experience has to be what defines your truth. So if your experience is small, because let's say you've never gone more than 25 miles from where you were born, and that's your experience, then your reality is going to be small. If you have a much bigger set of experience than that, then your reality is going to be bigger than that. So you have to define your own truth in terms of your own experience. So don't get frustrated in the sense that, well, if you're a beginner and you say, well, I've never remote viewed, or I don't know how to heal anybody, and I can't do any of that stuff, so I don't know whether I should believe it or not. That's a good place to be. That's exactly where you ought to be. You should be saying, and I don't know whether to believe it or not, because it's not in my experience. If it's not in your experience, it can't be your truth. And if you read it in a book or listen to me tell you about it or any other way, well, you're stuck. You can either believe it or disbelieve it. You can say, well, okay, I have friends that do that sort of thing, whatever, so I believe it. Well, it's just a belief. It's not going to do you any good. The only thing that will do you some good is to not be so lazy and start learning how to do it.
Yep.
Get the experience. Find out, what do I have to do to make that part of my experience?
Yep.
And when it's part of my experience, I'm going to be careful that I'm not led down some la-la lane of believing something that isn't true. It's got to be my experience to my standards of credibility. And that's the way it should be. So, yeah, take all your beliefs and throw them out. You have to generate your own truth through your own experience. If you believe things because somebody told you, that's a very weak way to go through life. You're not really making your own way. You're riding on the backs of other people, and you're going where they tell you to go, thinking what they're telling you to think. You're believing what they say or disbelieving what they say, and both of those will get you an equal amount of trouble. You're going to believe things that aren't true, and you're going to disbelieve things that are true. That's the point. Disbelief is just another form of belief. I believe it's not true. I believe it is true. They're both just beliefs. So you need to get rid of all of that. Stay skeptical and try it out. See where it takes you. Spend some time with it. If it doesn't change your life, or if it isn't important to you, then walk away from it. It's not that important. So I'd say to the beginner, in the beginning, I guess just suspend your beliefs, because if you try to let go of them, it's probably too scary. Because your life is built up on beliefs. Your whole reality is built up on these beliefs. People think, things you've read, things people have told you, things that are just part of the collective consciousness that are just out there, and we just absorb them because we're consciousness. So we absorb things out of the collective consciousness. So we have all these beliefs and attitudes and things we think are true. And to say just throw all that away would terrify most people, because that is the structure of their reality. Their reality is based mainly on belief and on fear and on ego. And it's the fear that creates the beliefs and the ego. You see, why do we believe things? Because we think it's important to know, but we don't have any experience.
Right.
And we don't take the time to go find out for ourselves because we're busy. We don't have that kind of time to find out everything for ourselves. Well, you should just then remain skeptical and say, well, maybe not. I'll not believe it or disbelieve it. Maybe I'll make it a 50-50 or a 20, 80 or whatever. Just give it some probability of being true or false, and leave it alone until you get more experience. And if you never get any more experience, then you'll always have kind of an indeterminate attitude toward it. As you get more experience, you can shift those probabilities a little bit. Say, okay, I had it an 80-20, and now I've seen some things, or I've experienced some things that makes me think it's more real. So now I'm going to make it a 90-10 because I've had some experience, but not necessarily enough to, to push it over the line to where I'm going to make it a 99.999 yet. So very few things in our life should be ones or zeros. They should be, a zero being a total disbelief, probability of zero of being true, and the other is a one. It's absolutely, certainly true and always true. Very few things should be ones and zeros. Most of our life should be somewhere in between. We live our life based on how we assess the probabilities rather than on being sure about what the truth is. So we have to give up this concept of the truth is, a particular way. And if I don't know what that is, then I'm kind of stuck. I can't act because I don't know the right answer. I have to guess or something. But if we throw that out and say, well, I live life, what I say, you have to live gracefully with uncertainty. If you can do that, well, that takes courage because you don't necessarily know a lot of things. So you're often doing things and you don't really know where that's going to take you. I read this book and, might change my life, might not, I meet these people and I interact with them and I hang out with them, and that could change who I become, particularly if I'm like 17 years old, it may make a big difference where I end up, and you don't know where life's taking you. But if you always are skeptical and you're always open-minded, then you will get to where you want to go eventually, if you just keep trying, keep trying to understand and take in more and more information as you go. So if you're a beginner, the first thing to do would be try to find all those beliefs. What
Yeah,
is it
yeah,
about your
yeah.
world that you believe? Well, you probably believe that the world is entirely physical, and that if it's not physical, it's not real.
Exactly.
Like daydreams aren't real, and night dreams aren't real. The real things are the physical things, and everything else is not real. Well, that's a belief.
Mm-hmm.
You see, if you're a character in a virtual reality and you're this elf, you believe that that virtual reality is real, and anything else outside of that's not real. Yet the very source that computes that, and the very consciousness that's making the choices has to be outside, has to be
Yep.
non-physical. So this idea that only physical things are real, well, then if that's the case, this couldn't possibly be a virtual reality. You see, if only physical things are real.
Right, right.
But science, quantum mechanics keeps telling us that that's not true, that materialism is not a fact. It doesn't work. It doesn't answer the mail. The things happen in quantum mechanics that couldn't happen in a physical reality. It's a probable, it's a probable reality. Probability and statistics is how reality works. It's not a material reality. So you have beliefs that you don't even know are beliefs.
Don't even know.
You think your beliefs are facts.
Yeah.
That's the thing about a belief. As soon as you believe it in your own mind, it becomes a fact. So now the fact that, all reality is physical is a fact in your mind. Yeah. It's not even something you need to question. Any scientist, you can ask almost any scientist and they'd agree with you. Yes, the physical world's the only world. There's nothing else real besides that. But see, that leaves a whole lot, actually probably about 80% of the most significant part of your life out.
Absolutely.
So where's this other 80% of your life? Where is the, where's the love? Where's the caring? Well, even where's the anguish? Where's all of these things that are not objective? The physical world is an objective world, but most of our life that is important to us is subjective, and all the choices we make and all the consequences we create out of that subjective world. Should I be friends with these people? Should I marry this woman or this guy? Should I have 6 children or 3 children or no children? Should I, wear my hair long or should I wear it short? All of these things are choices that we make, and they help define us. We are the sum of all these choices. And most of the choices that are important isn't what color is my car,
Nope.
what material is the roof of my house made out of? Those are all objective things. Those aren't the things that are really important. The stuff that's important to us are the subjective things. Relationship is almost entirely subjective. Well, relationship, to your significant other, to your children, to your parents, to your neighbors. I mean, relationship is pretty much the center of what it's all about. And none of that's objective. It's all in the subjective world. So when you say this is a material reality and only things that are objective and solid and material are real, you've just blown off the most important part of your life as not being real. All that subjective stuff, has no basis in reality. Well, that's not true. That's the important stuff. That's why we're here. That's the stuff that makes your choices and gives you the feedback and the consequences. So the stuff that's non-physical is the important stuff. See, so that's, if you get into this materialist viewpoint, it's not a good viewpoint, because they would say that all of that is subjective is just a hallucination. So 80-90% of your world and almost everything that's significant and meaning to you is just a hallucination. Wow. Doesn't mean a thing. It's all irrelevant. Forget about it. It's no consequence, not consequential. Well, we know that's not true.
It's not true.
It's the physical stuff that is really like the props on the stage. We're like the actors. The actors are important, and the storyline that the actors are playing out, that's important. But the props on the stage, Well, they're nice. They set the scene. I mean, they're part of it. Yeah, we need a physical reality, this virtual reality to live in because it sets constraints and gives us rules and so on. That's nice.
Yeah.
But that's not really the crux of what's going on here. And that's not really what's important. It's necessary to give us context to our interactions, but it's not fundamental. It's not the stuff that's most significant. So once you kind of realize that, you realize, yeah, reality really is bigger than just the physical. And that you realize I'm consciousness. Consciousness is an information system. Information isn't physical. Information is at the core of everything. And information's non-physical. So how could the only reality that matters be physical when the thing that derives everything else is information and isn't even physical? So and we're not just playing with words here. We're really talking about fundamental, very fundamental concepts of how you see yourself and see the world, see your reality in front of you. And most of us, because we've just kind of picked these ideas out of the ether, we pick them out of the collective consciousness. We go through life and say, yeah, reality is physical. Dreams aren't real. Daydreams aren't real. Nobody can heal anybody else with their mind. Nobody can remote view. These things are impossible. Seeing auras are just a bunch of fuzzy-headed people having delusions. We can say all that, but that's the case of people having beliefs, and the beliefs just aren't true, but they have them without even thinking about them. They just get that out of our culture. So that's why I say you need to throw out all those beliefs, all of them, of all sorts. And though that is a very scary proposition for most people, you can start just by suspending them temporarily as you gain, insight into a larger reality than just the physical one.
Well, Tom, you cracked open my head. And you're right. I did suspend my beliefs and then threw them all out and got into the subjective, and I changed everything. And you're right. So it's really a great way to look at it. And I got to tell people how much I love you, how much I've evolved. I'm evolving as we speak. You saw me at the beginning. You've seen what I've gone through. And you've changed my life. You've really, I really want people to get to know you, to know what you're really saying, and to get at the heart of all this, at all the non-physical. So we're going to end here. I'm going to thank you, but I pause because I want to stay on the line after this and ask you a couple of questions. What were you going to say that I could?
I was going to say for the beginner, realize that you do have an inner life. Realize that you do have an intuitive side of yourself, and treasure it. Treasure that intuitive side. Don't just push it away and say, you can't depend on that. Work with it, develop it. And if you spend even 1/10 as much time developing your intuitive side as you have spent developing your intellectual side, you would be a totally different person now. So if you just say, I do have that inner life, I do make choices, I do have relationships, what I think and what I feel, all of that is real stuff that is important to me. It's not just some random hallucination. It's stuff that's important to me. The most important things to me. So let's go with it. Embrace it. Put your arms around that and own it. And that's probably the first step. It's just saying, okay, I do have this intuitive side. Where is it going to lead me? What can I do with it? Where can I go with it? And that'll probably put you on the internet, and eventually you'll probably get in a meditation class, which will lead you someplace else, and so on. And 5 years later, you'll be a different person.
Yeah, remember how at the intensive, I talked about how we were programmed into not feeling. And I actually had a feeling, and you told me, you looked at me and said, it's just the beginning. And it opened up a whole world of feelings and intuition. And I want people to really understand that, to really embrace, like you said, embrace that, because
embrace it. Yeah, we've got this idea that feelings
Yes.
are the enemy.
What the
Feelings are
heck?
undependable. You know,
Yeah.
feelings will lead you down the primrose path to destruction. You know, you
Yeah.
need to get rid of those feelings and just use your brain. Take charge. Do it
So
right.
not true.
Don't let your
So,
don't let your feelings,
yeah.
drag you into things you regret later. So we have this very negative attitude toward the intuitive side and
Yes.
toward the
Yeah.
feeling side,
And I'm
which is a shame
so
because
love
that's
my
where all the
feelings.
richness of our life is. The
Yeah.
total richness of our life is in the feelings, and when we discount the feelings, we live in a very sterile, not very much
No.
fun, not very rewarding. We
Mm-mm.
don't go, wow, it's great to be alive. We don't feel that way. It's like, oh, it's another day. Got
No,
to
I
get
love
through.
my
Got to get through the
feelings.
next day. Yeah. Once you
Once
once you
you
live out of your
crack it
intellect,
open.
you're in this sterile space. So,
Yeah. No more. Yeah. I cry. I hug. Yeah.
yeah, you even go flying, I think,
I go
sometimes.
flying because I really do. I open up control centers where feelings are, and I just think it's the most wonderful thing I've ever had,
Right.
and I appreciate you cracking that open for me.
And I guess the last thing then would be that, okay, you have all these feelings and you let them go and you
Yeah.
have them. But again, you have to stay skeptical. Okay. And the
Yeah.
person you have to stay most skeptical of is yourself. Okay. So have all the feelings, let the intuition take you wherever it can take you, develop that side of you. But you need to stay just as skeptical of all of that and everything that happens there as you are skeptical of anything else. It's not a matter of just having a feeling. It's a matter of saying, how is that feeling useful? What can
Correct.
I do with that feeling?
Yes.
How does that feeling help me grow? How does it build a better me? You see?
Yes.
And if
Yep.
it doesn't, if that feeling is dragging you into some other place, well, realize that and say, I don't want to go there. I'm not going to go to that place. I'm not going to, encourage those kinds of feelings because they take me a place I don't want to go. So
That's a
you
really,
always,
really good point. You've
yeah, you
got to,
always
you can't
stay
just,
skeptical
you
of
can't just
everything.
let those fly. You're right, because it's like teaching the children about the difference between a good touch and a bad touch. There's touch, and
Yeah.
the same thing with the feeling. Just because you have them, you're right. It's good to break it open, but there's a point where you can tell someone, "Hey, stop kissing me." That's not right.
Yeah.
That's not a good thing. Those are really,
Sure.
really important thoughts and parameters. And
Yeah. Well, we do that
yeah,
in the intellectual space.
yeah,
We get into the intellectual
yeah,
spaces and we say, oh, that's not a good way
that,
to go. I don't want to go
yeah.
into nihilism because even though that's an intellectual thing, there's nothing in there very attractive. Everybody that's a
It's
nihilist is
not.
depressed.
It's very depressed.
You have to be depressed
Yeah.
if you're a nihilist. There's no other choice. So, we do that. We look at things in that side and we choose. And well, rather than just throw the baby out with the bathwater on the feeling side and say, well, you
Yes.
can't trust those feelings, throw them all away. We
Yeah.
just have to grow ourselves,
Grow up.
our
Yeah.
ability to distinguish and to compare and so
Yes.
on in the feeling space, just like we do in the intellectual space. So it's not that, yeah, forget everything, anybody ever told you, just go feel your life. And
I
that's
don't think
not,
I could do
that's
that.
not the way to success. But to not feel
Yeah.
your life at all is not your way to
Yes.
success either. You need to be
Yeah.
balanced. You
Yes.
need to have both. You need to have a sound, rational component, and you need to have a sound feeling component. And you need to know good feelings from bad feelings. And the only
Yes.
way you know them is to experience them,
To have them.
to
Yeah.
have them, deal with them, see where they
Yep.
take you. And eventually you'll become as mature and grown up on the feeling side as you are over on the intellectual side. And you'll find that intuitive space has a lot of other parts of reality to it. It's not just limited to the physical side, whereas that intellectual space is pretty well limited to the physical side because it's limited to language. Our
Good
intellect
point.
speaks in terms of language.
Good point.
Language was developed to describe the physical. So when you're thinking intellectually, you're thinking in language, and language, gives you a lot of freedom, but it also there's things that language can't explain. There's things that language doesn't describe. You know, language is about the physical reality. It was developed, it was made, it was created. You know, we've created it to explain the physical world to each other. But when we get over to the feeling and intuitive side, we don't have many words for that. Yeah, I had this feeling, but I can't explain it to you. You see, we're kind of left in a space with very few words and very few explanations, and that's because it's not an intellectual space. When you take the intuitive side and try to slice it and dice it down into little chunks of intellectual content, it all falls apart. That's not what it's about. It's a more holistic, a more intuitive space, not a space that is naturally reducible to its logical bits.
And I have a good friend that says words are thieves, and they're thieves. You know, they're not, they can't do it.
No, they don't. So there's a lot of reality that really you don't have words for.
Yep.
But you have to live it, not ignore it.
Yep.
And eventually, with time, it's not so much that the words are important, but you do understand those feelings, and you know what they're connected to, and you know where they'll take you and where they won't take you and how you can use them. And you suddenly become literate and aware in the intuitive side, just like you become literate and aware, you know, over on the physical side, on the intellectual side.
Yes, on the
intellectual side. So you need to become literate and aware in the intuitive side as well. And when you do, you'll find that all these paranormal things are just perfectly normal. They're not para anything. They're just part of being conscious and being aware in the intuitive side of a person. So we in the West are very unbalanced. We've got this, you know, we spend all of our life honing our intellectual side and denying that we even have an intuitive side. So we're super out of balance, and we need to get that more in balance. Now, we don't want to be all intuitive side, no intellect either.
Right.
That's just as out of balance and just as dysfunctional. You need to be,
correct,
you know, extremely right-brained and extremely left-brained both at the same time. You need to really develop both sides of you, and now you're a whole person, and your reality is so much bigger because the intellectual side can only take you so far. The intuitive side takes you the rest of the way.
And beginners need to know that, how much bigger it is. And I love what you talk about, the big picture. We're not, like you said, if you only live and don't go 25 miles outside of your radius. And what we're doing here is we're just ripping it open.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you do have to come with balance. And I love that.
Absolutely. You come with balance, and you come with skepticism.
Come with skepticism. Exactly. Open and skeptic.
Yeah.
Everything's balanced.
Has to prove itself to you through your own experience.
My experience. So even though, Tom, you're my mentor and my guide, and I appreciate that. And I love that you say, but it has to be Donna's experience. It has to be. That's why I'm part of the larger consciousness system. Why the larger consciousness system created me, Donna, to have a Donna experience, not me, Donna, to have Tom's experience.
Absolutely.
I love that. Yeah.
Yes, that's absolutely necessary. So you see, I don't have anything to sell. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. I just have something to give.
Yes.
You know, which is a different way of seeing reality. Mm-hmm. But it's not selling anything. It's not, well, you need to believe these things, and you need to go this, and you need to do this kind of meditation, and then you need to learn it. You know, it's not about that. There's nothing to sell. There's just something to give.
And you've given me that. You've given me the metaphors. You've, you know, and again, I can take the metaphor that you've given me and still decide to, you know, to fly a certain way. Instead of over the Blue Ridge Mountains, I decide to fly over here, or whatever it is. You know, you give and you give, Tom. You give freely, and I really, again, for my listeners to understand who you are, how much you give, and how many times can I say thank you, Tom?
Just once is enough.
You know, my God, Tom.
Because, you know, it's not like I go around saying, oh, what can I give here and what can I give there?
No.
It's just what else is there? You see, there's nothing else.
Yeah.
There's nothing else that really is
No.
productive in your life, really, other than what you can give.
Yeah.
You know, that's what it's about. So it's not a matter of going around and trying to find things to give people. It's just being who you are, and it all takes care of itself.
So I'm gonna make something. I'm gonna tell you something that hopefully will make you laugh, and I'll probably cut it out, but I want you to hear it from me. And that how much we love dogs and how dogs are important to us. And I was telling someone, I go, you know, if there was a model of a perfect human being, and I don't mean that you're perfect. I just mean if you had a, you know, someone that's balanced, someone that's congruent, someone that isn't selling anything, it would be you. So I said, you know, Tom is best in show. You're best in show for human beings. And I say that with great depth of love.
Well, thank you very much.
You know, yeah, I just have to say that. That's how I think. That's how I feel. And since
well, if it's how you feel, then that's your truth.
It's my truth.
Know?
So
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. There are many others besides me, though, who understand the things I understand.
Yes, you do. I know there's Jürgen. I know there's other people that I feel the same way, but I appreciate it. Tom, thank you for your time, your insights, your thought, your giving. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, this has been fun, and hopefully we have helped a whole lot of beginners.
Oh my gosh.
Somewhere look around and say, reality may be bigger than I think.
It might be.
You know, there may be parts of my life that I'm not even experiencing because I have beliefs that they don't exist.
Exactly.
So, and if we do that for people, then
oh my God,
that's great. You know, that's the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah.
So
for all the left brain people that are so left brained, all the right brain people that are so right brained, come on in the middle. It's the water's lukewarm, great.
Yes. So if we accomplish that, then we've done really good work. And I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to be a part of being able to do that. So thank you too.
All right. Thank you, Tom. So say hello to Pamela. Tell her I'm doing well. I appreciate what you've done for my heart. I have really, really great news. It's reversible. It's, you know, not stopping me. I'm going to keep on keeping on.
Yeah.
So,
you probably actually did a little good. When you have experiences like that, they tend to reorient you a little bit. The things that are important from the things that aren't so important tend to separate more clearly when you've had those kinds of experience. You know, I'm having a heart attack.
I'm having a heart attack.
Yeah, what's important here?
Yes.
Let's see. Do I need to worry about whether my hair's combed or, you know,
exactly.
What's important here?
My best friend coming down and getting me out of Costa Rica because I'm stranded in a hospital. Yeah.
Yeah. So you immediately begin to focus on things that are key.
Yes.
And you let the other stuff go, and that's often a good experience because we get so wadded up in the minutia of our beliefs and of our day and what we think we're doing and our image. It's sometimes a relief just to realize that there's an awful lot of what we do that isn't all that valuable.
No.
We could we could use our time better for a lot of things, but anyway. So all these things are actually learning. You know, every situation you can learn from.
I sure learned from that. I really did. So I love you, Tom.
Thank you so much.
I love you.
Love you too, Donna.
All right.
Until the next time.
Until the next time. Thanks, buddy. Okay. Bye. No.